Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Frew with BioBuzz for another episode of our What's the Buzz? This is, again, for those of you tuning in, our opportunity to talk to ecosystem builders, people who are really working behind the scenes or in front of the scenes to drive the ecosystems and the infrastructure that you all need to build new therapies and drugs and medical devices. So today I'm really excited to get to talk to you today, Peter. I'm here with Peter Walters, who's a fellow in Advanced Therapies for CRB. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, and happy holidays to you and to everyone else. That's I know we were just talking about that. Everybody's on a mad sprint at their companies right now to kind of wrap things up, and so hopefully we can give them some insights to either disrupt those strategy meetings a little bit more. Add another couple hours to the meeting. If nothing else, give them a good line of sight for what 2026 might hold.
Yeah, it's the season to wind down, so hopefully we'll give people some thoughts to go into 2026.
Yeah, I love it. Well, for those of you tuning in, so this is our thought leadership interview series. Believe it or not, it is sponsored by CRB. So today you're like not only a guest, but you're also a sponsor. So thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
And what if you've been to any of these in the past, you know that I always say that CRB is not only a great ecosystem builder, but they're literally building the ecosystem that we all operate in. So as a construction and design engineering firm, it's a good bet. No matter what biotech hub you're in, you look around and you're probably either working in or have worked in a CRB building, especially in the advanced therapy space. So thank you, Peter, and to all your team for CRB for being a good sponsor for this series each and every year.
Yeah, happy to help out. I mean, we certainly try to do something different for the industry. So hopefully people see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we definitely do. Well, I guess why don't we kick things off? You're a fellow in Advanced Therapies at CRB. Maybe start off with just intro. Tell our audience a little bit who you are, kind of what you do there at CRB, and then I'd love to dive a little bit into just, again, similarly around the report.
Yeah, so I'm Peter. I'm a fellow of Advanced Therapies here at CRB. My role kind of is to help look at market strategy for what's going on in the industry and how sort of we as an organization can help adapt to that and help support that, sort of looking at forward trends. And that's what certainly drew me towards the idea of what the Horizons report is. The report is, we've got a couple of them. We do a life science report annually. We do a food and beverage report annually. And then we do a market conditions report quarterly that looks at like the cost of commoditized goods and copper and lumber and steel and equipment. And sort of if you're going to be doing a project, the market conditions report's a great one to just sort of get eye line on lead times and cost fluxes and what's been happening across the year cost wise. The life science report really tries to look at the life sciences industry on the whole, and then a couple of very focused topics. What I really like about it is it's supported by a data backbone that you can't just data mine from clinical trials or things like that. We put together a rather thorough, lengthy survey that gets sent out to industry leaders, and they fill out questions that sort of ask at what are people doing with their businesses, where are you choosing to grow, where are you choosing to shrink and work out of, what hardships are you having, both technically and business wise, and how are you choosing to overcome those. And so we get the report really tries to highlight insights of what's happening overall with the industry and where those trends are, and forward looking 1, 3, 5 years out. Are there things that are very obviously going to shift? I think as we looked at 4.0 the last couple of years and what's happening with the industry from a digitalization standpoint and AI standpoint, those have been very hot topics. We've seen very specific pointed trends, but it's not the whole industry. It's very specific markets. It's very specific company sizes that are sort of leading that charge. And so that's the kind of data that we get from it. And I, as someone that's invested in the life science industry and the trends and what's happening, I just love this sort of data to see what's going on and where it resounds with what I have going on in my head. And then sometimes I get surprised by something and it's like, oh, okay, like, do I understand it wrong? Or is there something else going on here that I haven't thought about yet? So it's I always find it really interesting.
Yeah, I bet that is interesting. I mean, and this industry is so complex in general, though. So like that's got to be a lot of work to like really understand how to how to pull a report together from all the different components that make this industry kind of drive. Um, so this is what you said, 6 years that you've been doing the report now?
The first one was in 2020, and it was specific to cell and gene therapy. I think the 2021 report looked a little bit more at execution, so like modular delivery and skid manufacturing and a little more equipment granular level. And then ever since then, we've tried to keep it kind of based around the science that drives the industry. So who's making what, how are those products being made, are there things that are keeping them from really hitting their true potential, or are there things that are enabling them? Where are there sort of bubbles in the industry that are threatening to pop? And when they do, what's the fallout from that and things like that?
Yeah. So let's dive into the report a little bit. So, I mean, when I think about where we are as an industry, and I mean, I always when I think about the new year and what's ahead, I mean, terms like recalibration and navigating uncertainty and rebounding, and like these are all the things that I think about. So when one of those big ones that always comes up is all the disruption that we had this year, recalibrating around tariffs and supply chain. So I know that was one of the core topics. Let's dive into that a little bit. Like, what are some of the um, how did you all approach that in the report? And maybe can you talk a little bit about what some of you learned?
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely nailed it on the head in terms of like um, disruption and recalibration. I think when we sat down to brainstorm around the life science on the whole chapter and looking at what's happening in the industry, um, I think that was the number one topic that immediately came to mouth was like what's going on with both the actual tariffs that have been implemented, the looming of new tariffs, the possible removal or changing of tariffs, the rates that could possibly be changing. I think at this point in time, as of this recording, things have sort of maybe slowed down a little bit and hit a little more of a median. When we sent the survey out, which was back in the middle of last year, we almost were talking about how we might have to parse the data by by week because things were so volatile back then, right? And I think either side of whether you thought the idea of the tariffs were good or bad, it certainly was disruptive to the industry. Um, and I think that's kind of what the data represented when we went back to look at it was that like uh, whether it meant to have a positive impact or was expected to have a negative impact, I think a lot of people weren't sure what to do with it. Just that like things could change at any minute made a lot of people very hesitant to invest. I know I talked to an individual that was looking to build out a pretty significant R&D lab for their company's growth, and they were very nervous that they were going to accidentally invest in the world's most expensive lab at that time and place just because all the cost of construction went up so significantly at that very sort of specific period in time. I think when we look at the data, again, the response data back from the industry that we sent that survey out for, smaller companies seemed far less likely to adjust their spending plans as a result of the tariffs. And I think we could justify that because I think if you're a small sort of novel product, up and coming startup, your pathway is sort of set and dictated for you, and you have to keep moving to stay relevant. You have to keep moving to hit your milestone markers and to meet your investment markers. And you maybe don't have time to take a year or two off to let the market sort of resettle and let the dust settle and then make a decision. So I think most of them were like, we have to move forward no matter what. And if we have to change our cost strategy, we're going to have to do that. I think we saw large companies more likely to at least announce a U.S. manufacturing investment. There was a lot of talk of trying to onshore production back to the U.S. And I think just when you think about how long it takes to strategically plan a whole new, if we call it a greenfield facility, like that's not a turn on a dime investment. Like these are long investments that have 5-10 year plus strategies leading up to them and going into them. And even when you pull the trigger on it to go into design and then construction and then startup, it's several years between let's do it to when you're actually making anything on that line. So I think those probably were maybe less a reaction to tariff changes. However, if you can advertise that you are bringing manufacturing back to the US, I think people were leveraging that, especially larger firms were leveraging that to try to reduce tariff impact on them with the agencies. And so there was some strategy there that had a little more to do than just like the inflation of cost of goods. But one thing we definitely saw in the data was new construction aside, looking at pre-existing sites and how you're doing your spending plan. So this would be things like renovation and process improvements and upgrades and maybe tech transferring in new products to existing sites, which happens all the time across this industry. By and large, a huge slowdown in that marketplace. So sites that already existed, they were producing, I think people were much more hesitant to do anything. They're just like, let's just wait and see what's going on with all this. We can push these projects out a year or two because we're already operating and we can sort of just keep that motion, that momentum going and figure it out when things sort of settle and we can plan a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it makes sense on the small large company juxtaposition. But I mean, the amount of press announcements around U.S. investment this past year. I mean, we did an event with you all around reshoring back in June. It's like another $80 billion since then that people have announced. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And to your point, a lot of that has been in the books, but I got to imagine some of that is kind of press related. What about like moving forward though? So these tariffs, you talk about like some of the data. What does the data say anything about kind of like what we're looking at as like the dust settled? You feel like, where tariffs are, you feel like where people are with their mindset on things. You have supply chains kind of caught up a little bit.
I mean, I think definitely companies have had to rethink a little bit how their supply chains have worked out. I know there are some companies that have just chosen to, they consider like the tariff situation right now is a blip on the radar. And so we'll sort of internalize and eat this cost difference for the next year or two. And sort of, they don't want to like have to restructure everything. There's also been some companies who've said like, maybe this is an opportunity to do things a little bit differently. Maybe we already were moving in that direction, and this is that like spur on the flank to get us to move faster towards it. And then again, I think smaller firms or maybe even mid-sized firms that are more rigid in how they're going to execute stuff are just going to have to weather the storm for whatever happens.
What about, so you can't, I mean, I don't think you can talk about tariffs without talking about China. Any data you saw about kind of what the industry is seeing out of China? There's been a lot of, interesting shifts in the past 24 months with globally around our industry there.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes likes to be sort of a media look at, I don't want to say demonizing, but I'm almost going to say like demonizing China as this entity that wants to steal your data and try to make an extra dollar off of what you're doing and whatnot. I think while that may or may not be true for some markets, I think what we're seeing in the life science market is a massive master planned growth curve out of China, and not just China, like China, Japan, South Korea. There's a huge growth opportunity that's happening out of there, and what I feel is maybe the most exciting part for me, at least, is that while that market historically has been more of a, especially China, has been more of a supporting manufacturing structure to other innovative countries where you do product innovation in US or Europe, and then you maybe send production over to China to do at a lower cost and then ship it back globally. I think that, I'm not going to say the tide is totally shift, but I think we're definitely seeing huge innovation centers coming out of China and Japan and South Korea, where especially in novel products and these new burgeoning modalities, we're seeing a lot of very exciting, very promising drug products coming out of there that are now being licensed to bring back to the US and bring back to Europe for global rollout. And I think, especially for things like cell therapies and gene therapies, where the state of evolution is very high. We sort of tested the market, back in 2017, and since then it's iteration on iteration, improvement on improvement on improvement to try to make these drugs more effective and safer and more marketable from a cost perspective. The more innovative minds that you can get behind that train, the more progress you can get as an industry. And so I think having China become more of a powerhouse of innovation is only going to help these kinds of products get to a state where they're going to be commercially viable and more accepted and move towards more frontline therapies. And that's, I think, something everybody wants to sort of do in a very safe and methodical manner, but global support for.
Yeah, it's a good perspective, a good framing of the perspective that, again, there's, when you're in the data, you see clearly beyond the media headlines. So I appreciate you sharing that. One of the other major themes I know you wrote about in the report is just like regulation, the FDA, kind of some of the regulatory shifts that happen. How is an industry responding to all that based on the data and the report you see?
It's been a really interesting period. So I think, and this is speaking specifically about the FDA, right? I think we've seen announcements around trying to streamline the agency and get them to be able to do reviews and applications a lot faster, cutting out a lot of the quote unquote, cutting out a lot of the fat and trying to make things leaner and more executable. And then I think on the flip side of that, we've seen sort of pre-announced not approval dates, but review dates getting pushed out. And so clearly it's not necessarily working exactly as intended. And this being year one, I think that's expected regardless of what the long-term outcome is going to be. We've also seen a lot of higher leadership out of the FDA turned over. And I think that's given the industry on the whole a lot of pumping the brakes and hesitancy of like what to expect. As I see what's going on with the industry, sort of my expectation, I think some of the data certainly like sort of supports this, that like inspections and applications, which are sort of the core need from the agency to move the industry forward. Like you gotta be able to do facility inspections. You gotta be able to process applications for new drugs and turn over those reviews, whether it's approved or going back to do more studies or whatnot. I think where I certainly worry is if we go back, even like 5 years time, I think the agency was trying to stand up a lot of innovative new groups to create more interaction with the industry outside of a application specifically. So more early interaction, which I think the industry on the whole really craves. So I've got a new technology. I'm not sure that it exactly fits the structure and the skeleton of how the regulations are currently written. Let's talk about how we can make sure that we're doing something that you deem safe and applicable, that I'm going to file and do the right support safety testing and things like that. I don't want to do too much, but I want to do enough that you feel good about it. Or we're trying to do something very, very different with this technology platform or this facility. Can we get at least some tacit agreement that this is a good approach before we just go ahead and invest, $500 million of our company assets to make this thing happen? I think those early interactions are going to get cut back a lot just because there isn't the staff to be able to support those, or the restructuring just isn't set up now to really support some of those applications as much as they were trying to do before. And so I think how that happens going forwards will be interesting to see how that plays out in my mind.
Yeah, this is a good kind of segue, Peter. Like, that's the there's a whole staffing strategy that, and they've reduced staff quite a bit, right? So the report also does talk about people, like not just at the FDA, but like the workforce and people. Like, that's a core part of BioBuzz, and what we focus on is workforce too. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit. Like, what from a people perspective, how what are some of the data? What are some of the themes or trends that the companies are doing or reacting to in terms of their workforce, their training, their people? And could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe not surprising. There's probably some listeners on here that are going to relate to some of this. I think I think right now, especially as we're moving into more of um, a digitalized culture, trying to adopt more AI, not just at um, the Word document level and like the language model level, but at the manufacturing level, sort of like we talked a little bit before the call about AI driven R&D and whatnot. But then there's also the whole push for digitalization, creating digital twins, getting into robotic systems and higher automation levels and whatnot. The workforce on the whole is kind of beginning to de-emphasize those very rote routine tasks for which a piece of automation can replace or certainly adapt to, or a roboticized system can really help be leveraged for, and really emphasizing more of the critical thinking aspects. And so you get these technical positions, technical manufacturing and technical engineering, and certainly as we talked about potential upheaval and regulatory, having a robust regulatory department to know how to navigate and to maybe carry more of the load. I think those kinds of roles are being sought more and more as we get into these novel therapeutics where it's a lot more new science driven. There isn't quite a roadmap for it. These highly technical R&D people are, core and parcel to that. And then I think what we definitely saw in the industry, though, is that overall enjoyment of people's jobs within the life science sector is higher than vast majority of other industries, which is very exciting. I think that's being driven by people really wanting to be mission driven and really being passionate about what they're doing. And I think certainly from my own perspective, you show up to the workplace and you're working on a piece of equipment or a product line or a platform or something that's ultimately delivering a therapy that's going to change somebody's life. Like, that's a very meaningful sort of mission statement. And so I think the industry sort of galvanizes around that. I think one thing that we really saw that was kind of nuanced and interesting was people sort of like in their early careers do value that, but they really value having a strong career path and feeling rewarded for their efforts. And then there's that pivotal point sort of like in the mid 40s where it shifts from being driven by money and being driven by like having a career destination to doing difficult work and doing stuff that's mission driven and intellectually very stimulating. And that's what keeps them around. And I think I can certainly personally relate to that. So I think that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of there's a real career evolution to that. I mean, in the beginning too, there's a lot of people that are exploring, right? They so they need to know, hey, I'm starting in this role as a quality QC microbiologist. What does it look like for me?
And can I go somewhere? Can I grow somewhere? Yeah.
Yeah, those are all, we hear that too. We work with a lot of employers, and we hear a lot about that. Like, how clear is it that your career path, and it's not linear too, like how clear is it in your organization that you do have development plans so someone can come off the manufacturing line and get into project management or process engineering, and that clarity is really important in those early years as well. And then yeah, I share that with you in mid 40s here. It's really about like, hey man, I want to do something that's going to challenge me, that's going to that I'm going to like really have a notch on my belt that I can be proud of, and be like, look what I did. I commissioned the first ever XYZ manufacturing facility. I did, those are like really important.
Yeah.
And from us, we're, BioBuzz, we work with a lot of employers to tell those stories. That's what we get hired for, to tell those stories so they can attract the top talent. So we've seen that the storytelling is an important part of the equation in recruiting more than ever, because a lot of things that your report signified, like the mission, the type of work, the career path, all that stuff.
Yeah, it really gets people emotionally involved to showing up day to day. I think the other stat we saw that was super interesting to me was we asked a whole survey question around like what sort of amenity either makes the most impact to you from a day to day or would make the most impact. And by a notable margin, remote or hybrid work environment was number one. But when you think about the life science industry, like you can't do R&D from your house, and you can't like all the manufacturing techs who have to be there to make these therapies a reality. Like, you can't do that externally. And if you're, an engineer on site trying to troubleshoot, MSAT team on site trying to troubleshoot, like you can't do that from home. And so I think um, I think the takeaway there is definitely like understanding where there is flexibility for staff to be able to maybe flex, knowing that some of these jobs are required to be in clean rooms or in shops. But I think then it's really trying to make sure that the rest of the ecosystem is there to sort of support a very innovative, collaborative environment. And selling the story and selling the mission statement and making sure that the workforce isn't just clocking in and clocking out, but they understand like, hey, I got to make sure that this thing is installed properly or is running smoothly, because this one cog is a piece of a whole platform that's delivering a therapy that's going to somebody that's going to cure this or is going to really help treat this, and that while this, installing this filter housing feels very like routine and rote, that like it makes a big difference at the end of the day, at the end of the year, and has an impact on somebody very personally. Like that's what gets people, I think, up and in their seats at the end of the day. So I think getting that workforce really understanding the story, I think is so important.
Yeah, no, I agree. We've seen some interesting things that, from a CDMO, CRO standpoint, a lot of times they'll bring their customers in for all team meetings to share kind of the story, especially in advanced therapies, and autologous especially. Like, you can bring in patients that are being like, so there's a lot of opportunities companies have for kind of codifying that for their people. I know we're coming up on time here. We got to touch on a couple things. You talked about some of the innovation around AI and continuous processing. That's something that's like you guys go into detail in the report, and automation and some different modalities. What are some other things, just in the last minute, let's give some breadcrumbs here for some of our audience. What are some of the other things that are in the report that people can kind of download and kind of dig out for themselves?
Yeah, so we looked at process intensification and like what steps are really sort of being emphasized in the space, and sort of tease out. We saw a real push, especially by large pharma, into fully end-to-end continuous manufacturing. And we're obviously not there at a commercial state yet, but I think in terms of the breadcrumbs, like it's getting there. And so what's the implication of that, both at a company level, but at an industry level? And then on the flip side of that, how far do you continue to sort of innovate and optimize and push your processes versus when is it time to sort of say enough's enough and then start standardizing across your platform, standardizing across your network to get you more unification and some better efficiency and all that, so you don't end up with like 7 wildly different manufacturing platforms that all cost their own cost values and there's no interaction or synchronicity between them.
That's interesting, and you go into some 4.0 stuff and some different modalities as well. So I mean, I've been going through the report that you pack a lot. Like I said,
it's a hefty report.
It's a hefty report, but it's a smooth read too. So I commend you guys on being able to do that, because as I've said in the beginning, it's tough to take an industry like ours with so many different niche modalities and niche experience elements and pull it into something that you can kind of really kind of pull out some very good data from. So I don't know how long the survey was you were giving people, but I commend you all on what the end product is. Again, for year number 6, I encourage everybody to download it. We'll make sure it's in the comments for you to download and check out. But great reading as you're going into the end of the year.
Yeah,
If you need to step from the house, if you're like, step away from the family for a little bit, get a break, and recharge from the chaos of having everyone home. Make sure you got the report on hand.
absolutely. We tried to make it bite size, so hopefully it's not too dense for the holidays.
Yeah, indeed. Well, hey, Peter, thank you so much for giving us a taste and talking about some of the data you saw. I mean, really, really interesting stuff. So again, really appreciate the work you do all year to really give us all some of these clarities, because it's hard for us to keep up on all the things, and it's nice to have a resource like this at the end of the year.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. Well, wishing you happy holidays and a very happy new year, Peter. I hope you got some fun plans in store. And to everybody who's joining us today, this is our Peter. You're the end. You bookended our
Right.
What's the Buzz? So you're the last guest of 2025. So thank you.
Yeah, I wish everybody a happy new year.
Yeah, and we'll be back first week of 2026. So BioBuzz will be live actually out in California, not too far from you, Peter, for JP Morgan Week. If you are attending, I highly recommend the QNova Life Sciences Forum. We will be there. We'll be there doing some live interviews, talk about what's happening. We'll also be part of their 3-day. They have a 4-day partnering forum. Over 1,500 companies attend. They have a very curated experience. So if you're an early stage company or a large pharma looking to really make the most of that week, I know it's a crazy week out there. Definitely look at the QNova Life Sciences Forum as a really good option. You can get the link on our website or on their website. Just Google QNova Life Sciences, QNOVA. We also have a JP Morgan events guide that QNova helped us put together. So if you'll be out there, I hope you come and see BioBuzz. We're going to be doing What's the Buzz the first week of January, live What's the Buzz with MTech, with Sean Green, the CEO of MTech, while we're out there. And we're really excited for 2026. It's going to be a really great year. If a lot of your data is right, Peter, we've got a lot of exciting things to work towards next year.
I certainly hope so.
Well, again, thank you all. We're going to sign off and have a very happy